really surreal. Like we always envisioned we would get to this point. We always hoped we would get to this point. It took a little bit longer with a couple years with the pandemic, but we're finally getting to that like major league level where we're getting that major league traction and teams are starting to see the value that our platform can bring to them.
Welcome to episode 133 of The Route, presented by White Whale Marketing. The Route is a glorified sports business coffee chat. There's a new guest every episode as they share their experiences and route in sports. As always, I'm Chris Nascimento, and let's get started. Before we begin, just a couple things to cover before we get into today's guest. First off, if you haven't already and you're watching on YouTube, you can see at the top hand corner here, it's a little small, we'll get that fixed. It says The Route. Underneath that, it says @The Route Sports. That is our username and handle on all social media. So whether it's TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, I'm sure I'm missing something, LinkedIn, we're @The Route Sports. So you can follow us there. We have a little episode cover that we release with each episode that's a little unique specifically to that guest. So you can check it out there and, potentially learn more about what's going on, maybe some of the tidbits that were shared in that episode. Additionally, something that's unique with that is I mentioned LinkedIn. So for those of you listening, I know it's primarily people in the sports business space, people trying to get into the sports business space. LinkedIn would be a great tool for you to either start your network, expand your network, or just kind of continue to network, right? Where you can connect with myself, guests, or even just like-minded people who are interacting with the post. So check us out there. And I think LinkedIn would be the best tool if you're listening to this podcast and following us there. So check it out. And then lastly, before we get into today's guest, I just want to quickly remind everyone, if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast. It's @The Route Sports on all platforms, Amazon, YouTube, Apple, Google, all the big ones, Spotify. So you can check us out there. So we're on 10 audio platforms. When you like, subscribe, follow, rate 5 stars, it does help the podcast grow a little easier. So it is much appreciated. And then in regards to YouTube, it's underneath the White Whale Marketing YouTube channel. So that's White Whale MKTG. And we have the Route playlist there where you can see the last, I believe, 60 episodes since we started going in video. So you can check us out there and hopefully you enjoy the podcast. But with that now shared, we can get into today's guest. I'd now like to welcome someone who is the second guest in our back-to-back series with FanSaves. This co-founder has experience in sales, marketing, and even playing professional hockey. So I'd now like to welcome someone who is the co-founder and CEO at FanSaves, Kris McCarthy. Welcome to The Route. How's it going?
Hey, Chris, doing well. Thanks so much for having me here today.
Yeah, no, very, very exciting. And I think as I mentioned to before we began, I always thought, I reached out and said, oh, that's too bad I haven't been able to get Kris or Shannon on. And then once I looked into it, I was like, oh, I never did. So that's my bad. I'm happy we have you on today and kind of get into it.
Yeah, super excited to be here with the great lineup of guests that you had. So just happy to be a part of that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm excited. So as every episode's gone for the last 130 plus, take me through your route, right? So I know you played hockey when you first started. Do you mind maybe sharing how you got into the sport, how you developed throughout that career, and then how did you transition and end up as a co-founder of FanSaves?
Yeah, I have a really different route from how I started, my professional hockey career and how I ended up as the co-founder of a sports tech startup. And it kind of goes back to my minor hockey days. Like I grew up in Ottawa, proud Canadian, grew up playing hockey at the competitive level. And in my minor midget year, my draft year to the O, I was playing up with the major midgets and I got hit from behind, ended up tearing my meniscus, fracturing my kneecap in 6 places, all these injuries. So I had to rehab for about 6 months and, came back the next year with, the goal of coming back stronger and trying to get drafted. So halfway through the season, guy kind of hit me awkwardly and it kind of tweaked my knee and ended up tearing my ACL. So back-to-back years of devastating knee injuries. And at that point, I kind of gave up on the dream of playing in the NHL like every Canadian kid has, and kind of shifted my focus to going to school and getting my education while also playing hockey. So I was fortunate enough to go and play a year in Saranac Lake, play college. And then from there, like my coach went to a prep school not far from there in Lake Placid. So I went from college back to prep school, which is basically a grade 13 postgraduate. Did a year there as I was hoping to get like, at least a partial scholarship to a Div 3 or Div 1 school, and ended up having a couple offers, but just out of my price range, couldn't afford to go. So decided to go back to Ottawa, go back home, spend a year at home, and play junior A, my last year at junior A, and try to get some looks from some scouts. And at the end of the year, I kind of made the decision that I really wanted to go back to school, get my education, and kind of start my career. So ended up getting accepted to SUNY Potsdam University in upstate New York. And also while I was like working during the summertime, preparing to go to school, good friend of mine who actually worked at his restaurant. It was a Greek restaurant called Greek on Wheels. So I did prep and delivery as a job during the summertime. One day he came into the restaurant. He was like, "Hey, Kris, like Carts, like I want to tell you something really cool." And he proceeded to tell me that he had bought this franchise and this new professional franchise in this new professional hockey league and basically upstate New York and the surrounding area. So he actually signed me. I was the first player signed to the team and signed that contract in the back of a Greek on Wheels restaurant. So I always say that's a kind of a cool, funny story where you sign your first professional contract. But from there, I went to SUNY Potsdam for 4 years, got my business degree in business administration, and then ended up playing 4 years of professional hockey while I was at school. Following that, I played 5 more years of pro hockey before transitioning back into the front office. And that's when I met Shannon, where we came across the pain point, my co-founder. And that's what led to us founding our startup. So lots of like really interesting stories in between there and things that happened that had to happen for me to be here and for us to meet. So, I'm really proud of my route and the things that I've learned over my career, and, couldn't be happier to be here and sharing it with you today.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And we'll definitely get into all that. And, not the same playing hockey, but I did tear my ACL last spring playing soccer, and I'm in the process of recovering. And I can only imagine having those initial knee injuries and tearing it again. The process is so long. I definitely understand your sentiment of like, hey, maybe this isn't just for me, because it's a long process to come back from that.
Yeah. And I would just say, like, I was crushed when I blew my knee out, especially the second time. I was like, okay, like this is my dream going out the window. But it really was one of the things that affected my route. And when I look back, like it taught me so much about myself. It taught me like, overcoming adversity and just like, coming back stronger. It was like something that I haven't really faced a lot of adversity up until that point in my life. And it was something that, I really had to get over and to move on with my life. And when I look back, I'm like almost proud that happened, because it sent me down a different route that I could have never imagined.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And I'm more of, let's say, the gym class hero where that happened, just playing in an adult rec league. But it definitely tests you, and you definitely learn a lot. We're like, oh man, like I remember just waking up, like, I can't believe this happened to me and I have to go through all this. But no, that's awesome. And I guess before we get into your route, you're just, dropping Greek on Wheels. Great place. I've been there, one of my favorites. So that's awesome. But I love to kind of get into your route a bit more. And I think maybe the great place to start at near your beginning is when you had that initial thought of, obviously, I know you're saying those injuries were like, hey, this NHL dream probably is going to happen, but you still had the opportunity to play pro hockey. But at that same point, I always find it interesting when athletes see that fork in the road, let's say, right? Because sometimes, I've talked to athletes, I'm like, hey, you're not LeBron James, you're not Cristiano Ronaldo, and as hard as that is to say, it's great that you're a professional athlete, but maybe you should look at, growing your network in an industry you'd like to get into afterwards, or, some of them are focusing on school. What made you realize and have that perspective of, hey, maybe this isn't going to be my full-time career forever and ever, and I should start looking at school as an option as well?
Yeah, I think my parents were a big part of that, strong proponent of me getting my education. And, I really wanted that too. Like at that point I was like, okay, like there's not a high likelihood I'm going to make it into the higher levels of professional sports. And I always had like a flair for entrepreneurship. So going to school and studying business seemed like the right thing to do at the time. And it also gave me the opportunity to like play professional hockey, get paid while going to university full time. And one of the cool things that happened was when I was at school, I lived in an 8-man suite all 4 years I was at Potsdam, and I lived with members of the guys' hockey team each year. So when I be at school, I'd be invited to all like the hockey house parties and like hang out with all those guys. So a lot of like common interests. And then when I'd go on the road and play with my professional hockey team, it was like you had that family as well too. And anyone that's ever played even competitive or professional sports knows that camaraderie that you build with your teammates. And so like I almost had like 2 families worth of like groups of friends, that I could rely on. And so like looking back, like it was an awesome experience. I got to have like a great college experience, but also play professional hockey. And I think that's really rare. So when I look around at my network and friends that, I played professional hockey with that forgave their education to play pro hockey. Now I see a lot of them that are working, jobs like insurance and selling cars, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I also saw guys that I played with that chose the education route and played hockey at the university rather than going to play pro, and then they, as out of school, they got into teaching or whatever their degree was. So that you're talking about a fork in the road. Like a lot of guys make that decision to either go play pro and give up their education or to pursue their education after, or they go to school and they never get the dream of playing professional hockey. So I'm really fortunate. I'm really grateful that I was able to experience both.
Yeah. And if you don't mind, you might maybe sharing a bit more of what that was like, right? Just playing pro and being in university at the same time. Because, let's say I remember being a student or even chatting with students who were like, hey, it's midterm week. Like it's game over. I'm not doing anything other than studying and preparing for these exams or final assignments. So how are you managing that, right? I'm sure there's practice, a heavy schedule on the pro side as well. So what was that like?
It was incredibly difficult. The first 2 years I played for a team in Akwesasne, up near Messina. So it was about a 45-minute to an hour drive away from school. And then my last two years of school, I played in Watertown, New York, which was about an hour and 30 minutes away. So almost every day I would drive from school to practice. We didn't practice every day. It was more like 3 times a week kind of thing. But every practice I was there, I had to drive back and forth. So that was difficult in itself, to schedule around my classes and my schedule. And then just like completing tasks, right? Like I would get big projects and then I'd have to go on the road Thursday night and we wouldn't get home until Monday morning at like 6 a.m. And then I'd have to drive back from either Akwesasne or Watertown back to school to make my 8 o'clock in the morning class. So it was extremely difficult. I did a lot of work at the library. Like if I knew I was going away on the road, I would just lock myself in the library and kind of crush out all the work for the week that I had to do so I could go on the bus, where not a lot of work gets done in between watching movies, joking with the boys and playing cards. So it was very difficult. I'm very grateful though, that I had professors that were really lenient and that they gave me like, extra days and, timelines to hand stuff in and things like that. So I kind of made it clear to them, like my situation. They were very like forgiving and very accepting to like what I was trying to accomplish. So.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And I'm sure too, like as tough as that was, and I'm sure there's like a lot of grinding within those couple of years, but like the discipline or even just the experiences and things you were able to learn just from, time management and just kind of understanding and setting expectations. I'm sure that was just something that you can't replicate anywhere else, no matter where you go, where you work, whatever you do. There's never going to be that type of, 2 crazy schedules that you need to combine together. So I'm sure that's definitely helping you out now.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Time management was the biggest thing. And then going back to earlier, overcoming adversity. So those are like 2 themes so far that we've talked about that have been a big contributor to my life and that have helped propel me to where we are now.
Yeah, I don't know. That makes a ton of sense. And I guess just continuing on throughout there, right? You're talking about how you then played pro in different areas. And I think one of them, if I'm not mistaken, Watertown was where you eventually met Shannon, correct?
It was actually Cornwall,
Cornwall, yeah.
in my second last year where I met Shannon. In 2013, I was playing my 4th year of pro hockey, and I was the captain. And so halfway through the season, the owner fired the coach and general manager. And I remember he pulled me into the office one day and he was like, I want you to take over the team as general manager. So I had known him for a couple of years. He's the commissioner of the league. He knew I was going to SUNY Potsdam and that I was like really motivated. So I got the opportunity. I jumped at it right away. I said, yes, of course. and what that entailed was basically running the entire organization. So managing all the volunteers, the game day staff, all the game day operations, the ticketing, the sponsorship. I actually hired a coach who was also a player on our team. He had played in the ECHL, so he had a lot of experience. So he kind of took over a lot of like the hockey operations and the signings and things like that. And we actually made a pretty good team and, finished out the year, got through the year. And then the next year, the team was sold to new ownership, new local ownership. And I was hired as the sales and marketing director. So that's kind of how I got my start in the front office. I had an opportunity that was presented to me and I jumped at it. And it's the best thing that ever happened looking back, because it sent me down a path of like life in the front office. It was not something I'd ever been exposed to, but I was always interested, having been a big hockey fan growing up and watching a ton of games and seeing all the advertising. So, if I hadn't said yes to that opportunity, who knows where I'd be right now. It certainly wouldn't have been in Cornwall meeting Shannon and taking over that professional hockey team and then coming across the pain point that led to our startup. So, big pivotal moment in my life for sure.
Yeah, no, that's very cool. And I guess before we get into the aspect of when you finally meet Shannon and figure out that pain point, I guess you're essentially thrown into, let's say, the deep end, right? It was sink or swim, right? And it's essentially you jumped on an opportunity, said yes, and I'm sure that opportunity alone to kind of, figure out everything, have all these problems arise that if you were just, I don't know, let's say a ticketing intern somewhere, you wouldn't get to have all these different experiences. It's almost like you were in like an incubator, right? You just kind of learned extremely fast. And do you think that's kind of something where all that experience you're then like available to you, that it almost matured you in regards to the business side of sports, or like, hey, I had to deal with so many different things, so many different, types of problems from all different types of, marketing, business development, etc. They're like, hey, I kind of have a good grasp and a strong foundation of what is needed to be successful because you've had your hands in everything so far.
Yeah, I really learned really quickly. Jumping into the deep end is a good way of mentioning it. I threw myself into it. I remember like sleeping in cars a couple nights. I slept on like a porch a couple nights. Like I just did whatever I had to do. I just totally put my all into it. Like at this time, I was still at SUNY Potsdam. So when I finished at school, then I put all my effort into the team. But yeah, it was really tough. Like one thing I really learned about myself was how to be a better communicator. I was often walking into businesses off the street and saying like, hey, have you guys ever heard of the Watertown Wolves or the Watertown Privateers? We're the new professional hockey team here in town. And, we'd love to, have you guys a part of it. So just meeting all these business people and communicating and just selling sponsorship was nothing that, I had never sold sponsorship before. So you really learn a lot about like rejection and hearing no. So I think like, overcoming, again, another theme here, overcoming adversity. I really learned a lot about myself and how to be a professional.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And to be honest, that's something I was discussing with Shannon when we were just recording our episode, where the aspect of getting thrown into that deep end and then having to learn, right? It's very different than if you just had that linear growth at, let's say, the Senators, right? Where sure, you get great experience and you'd have someone to mentor you, but it's very different. Did you ever come to, I don't know, have a moment when you're going through that process where you're like, hey, wow, it would have been great to like learn from someone just because then they could pass on the different knowledge? Or was it more so, hey, I don't have time to think about that and I'm learning so much already that I wouldn't get this anywhere else?
Yeah, I would say there was another executive at another team in Danbury, Connecticut, that kind of ran that team, all the marketing and the sales and everything. His name was Herm Sorcher. And he's still there today. And he kind of took me under his wing. He taught me a lot about, like different marketing ideas, how to approach sponsorship, how to sell tickets, how to resonate with fans. So I'm really grateful for his guidance in that early year. And then also the commissioner, Don Kernan, the league was early at that point, and he took me under his wing as well too, and was a big supporter of mine. Like he never turned down my ideas. He always supported me, and he just allowed me to like flourish and kind of test and do different things. So those are two people that, while I didn't have, like a lot of kids or people go into like a sports franchise of entry level, position, and they've got that mentor right there that's guiding them, right? Like I really didn't have that. I came across Herm and Don that supported me, but they weren't there on a daily basis, like helping me with the ins and outs. It was kind of like a lot of things I had to learn for myself. And I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, I know that makes a lot of sense. Where I find that even kind of applies to myself. Where I was working at a team that kind of just let me run and do my own thing, and I was like, hey, like I'd love to maybe work beneath someone, especially if I was at a team. But when I went to go start my own thing, I didn't have that, right? Because it's me, and I really found what kind of maybe allowed me to turn the corner or maybe take it to the next notch is once I was like, hey, like I'd love to maybe learn from you, or hey, can I pick your brain about this, and kind of starting asking those questions. And then once I finally had those mentors, as you were mentioning, that was the key difference, right? Because whether they were working at golf or different things like that, it's still very much applicable to, and it's almost just that reassurance I found, right? Where you're doing something and you're like, hey, am I doing it right? And they're like, hey, no, that's exactly what I do. Just keep it up or tweak it like this. And that confidence boost that it provides you of like, hey, like I'm on the right track and I'm just gonna kind of keep at it and you'll get there is definitely, I'm sure, helpful to that. Were there any maybe other people that kind of helped you along the way? Because I think Shannon mentioned this. I think a lot of people on this podcast mention it. It's all about, who you know. As maybe sometimes as cheesy as it sounds when you hear it in university the first time, you're like, oh yeah, sure. But at the end of the day, it is all really about your network. So how did that end up impacting, and were you able to maybe meet other people that you're eventually able to learn from as well?
Yeah, I would say like there was a couple of people that were in the community. I'm talking during this time frame when I was the GM that outside of the couple of guys that I mentioned that didn't have anything to do with the team or sports or anything. They just really wanted to help me. Like we created a great bond and relationship. And there was a couple people in particular that really kind of helped take care of me. And, I was living with people. I was in and out. I was in my car some nights, hotels. Like I was just, an hour and a half away from home and school. So I was just trying to make it work. And there's a couple of people like that stand out to me that really kind of like helped me get through those years. But as we moved on, years later, founding FanSaves, like we have a full advisory board, a very diverse advisory board of, really credible people, not only in the sports industry, but on the HR side, on the data and privacy side. We've really even on the promotion and PR side, like we've really diversified our board so that if we ever have any questions, we can just reach out to those people and kind of get that expert advice. And obviously I didn't have that back when I was like fresh out of school, trying to navigate my way through the sports industry. But I definitely think it's great to have mentors, people that are there, and we're coachable. I think that's something that comes from being like an athlete. Both Shannon and I, competitive athletes, we're very coachable. We're like sponges. We take in the information and we try to apply it to the best of our abilities. So I definitely think mentorship, advisorship is super important for career development, but also even at the stage that we're in, 5.5 years into our startup now, and we're still learning every day. So it's great to have people like that in your corner for sure.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And if you don't mind, before we kind of get into FanSaves a bit further, do you mind maybe sharing for those listening, right? A lot of them are, let's say, 20-year-olds starting their career, and maybe even 30-year-olds as well, where they're looking to maybe take it to the next level. How were you able to, let's say, develop that advisory board, or how did you end up finding them to then help you as well? Because I'm sure that's something, whether people are starting a business or even just launching their career, they can even still have, let's say, their personal advisory board as well that can then help them through different types of decisions too.
Yeah, I'll speak to the business side. We were really scrappy early on. Like one of the things that we did to grow our brand was pitch. So we, applied to a lot of pitch competitions and got selected to pitch. And, we go up, we'd pitch, and all those people in that room then now knew like what our brand was all about. And a lot of times people would come up to us. I remember our first pitch, it was Startup Ottawa. One of the judges came up to us after and he was like, wow, this is like really interesting. I teach sports business. Like I would love to be a part of this. And that was like our first advisor that we identified. But just people that we've met throughout this journey, this route, that have just been interested in our company and see the vision of what we're doing and how we're changing sponsorship and just want to be a part of that. So, when we find that person that we have a really good vibe from, and someone that, is strategic, that we think can like help our business, but someone that we can also, kind of provide some value back to, generally how our process has worked, how we've secured our advisors is, we just grow that relationship a little bit, 3-4 calls, have coffee, talk about the industry, talk about the business, where it's headed. And you can know pretty quickly if someone's passionate about what you're doing or if they're not. So you want to align yourself with the people that are passionate, not just about what the company is and what you're building, but you as a founder, right? This is someone that you have to work with, someone that you have to listen to, right? Like if they're a nightmare to deal with, like that's not someone that you want to associate yourself on a daily basis or a weekly or monthly basis, right? So I would just say like business is all about relationships. Everyone knows that. Like building relationships is like paramount in business. So you'll know when it's time. Like when you're speaking to someone and they see the vision of what you're doing, you'll know.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And I think it's kind of a great insight for people to kind of take away with that. And I guess kind of moving on throughout your career, I think it's a perfect time to, as we're doing these back-to-back episodes, I'd love to hear now your perspective on how you and Shannon met, where for those that didn't listen to the last episode with Shannon, she was kind of saying you guys were part of the same team, if I'm not mistaken. You got into a fight, broke your hand, and then she was told, hey, Kris is going to come in and help you be director of sales and marketing. And what she was saying was she kind of had, let's say, her guard up because she's like, hey, who is this guy trying to take my job or different types of things like that. But I'm curious what your experience in that initial meeting was like.
Yeah, it was 2017. I was playing professional hockey in the Federal Hockey League in Cornwall, Ontario for the Cornwall Nationals. And I got in a fight behind the net, like she said, just protecting my teammate. And actually ended up breaking my finger. So I've got the broken bone and the scars to prove it. But so I was going to miss 11 weeks of the season. And like you said, I went to the owner and I had experience from previous years in the front office. And so he brought me on as a sales and marketing director. And that's when I met Shannon. She was doing some of the marketing for the team. And together we just kind of like revamped the organization, both on the sales and on the marketing side, and increased the attendance. And then during the summer, together we were selling sponsorship, and brands kept telling us over and over again that they didn't just want the traditional inventory we were selling, and instead they wanted something that could digitally activate our fans and allow them to collect customer analytics. And we didn't have anything like that. We were working on commission. So we said, like, what can we do to solve this problem? And when we looked in the industry, we found like a lot of teams were still using paper coupons as the medium between the fan and the sponsor. So we set out to create a platform that could bring all these deals from team sponsors all on one platform, and allow fans to redeem them from one platform as opposed to having downloading multiple different apps. So that's kind of a quick overview, but I've got the broken finger to prove it.
That's awesome. Yeah, and then I guess kind of building on that too, when did it be, this is something I didn't get into with Shannon, but how did you both then realize, hey, this is a great opportunity. There's something here for us to actually start a business and kind of grow it beyond, just being, I know Shannon said it was a team app to begin, right? It was part of the team app. What was that barrier that made you realize, hey, this is something bigger than just an asset for the team?
Yeah, I had went home for like the afternoon, and I came back home to Cornwall, and Shannon had like created this app, and she's like, look, it's like I created this team app, and one of the functions was FanSave. At the time, not plural. And it was going to be like a spot where our teams like coupons from our partners could live and fans could redeem. And so we started going around to businesses in the community and kind of showing them like, hey, like, would you want to offer a deal to our fans? And businesses were like super receptive to it, right? It was a way that they could digitally activate fans and a way that they could track that engagement on our back end dashboard. So we got a lot of like really positive feedback from that. And at that point, we kind of looked at each other and we were like, let's take a run at this. We both were working for two different teams at that point. And we had two teams that we could like implement this into right away and validate it. And a lot of times that's the hardest thing for a startup founder is finding that first one or two clients that will, go all in and kind of like help validate the platform. So we had a very basic platform built. And in the second year, we were able to further validate that with businesses in the community and with our fans. So that's kind of how that all happened.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I guess just kind of learning about how that, you're able to just push it over the edge. And then I guess building on that too, when did you guys start, let's say hitting your stride, right? Because I know you just mentioned there, the biggest thing when doing a startup, you having those, let's say one or two first two clients that really believe in you and allow you to go all in on it. But when did things start, gaining momentum, and then you realized, hey, like this is really starting to take off? How long did that take?
Yeah, it took us like a couple and a half years to kind of like get the platform where it needed to be a sellable platform. And so like early 2020 was like going to be our first sales year. And then in March came, and we all know what happened come March, right? So like we were shut down, like our entire business model was just thrown out the window. Like our stakeholders are the teams, the sponsors, and the fans, and everything stood still or was postponed. So we were kind of in like a weird situation. We ended up doing like a gift certificate program to support local businesses across Canada, and that kind of kept our brand relevant. We also started a podcast called Living the Startup, where we feature other startup entrepreneurs. But for basically 2 years, we were on the sidelines, just trying to keep our brand relevant and scrape by to be able to pay any of the bills that we had to pay. And you know, when we started to come out of it in 2021, at least here in Canada, it was a bit more delayed, the recovery, than it was in the States. So we shifted our focus to the States, and this past year was like our first true sales year, and we've had the best year ever as far as sales, redemptions, KPIs across the board. So one thing that happened, like looking back, it's a blessing. I don't want to say like the pandemic was a good thing, because a lot of people lost their lives. It certainly wasn't a good thing. But for the sports industry, it really accelerated technology and the importance of technology in sports. So you think of like ticketing, right? Like before the pandemic, a lot of teams still use like physical tickets. And then within 2 years, like it's hard to find a team now that doesn't have like a digital ticketing platform as their main carrier. So that's just an example of like one vertical within sports that was like immediately affected and accelerated by the pandemic. And for us, it really helped us too, because teams started to understand that traditional assets just didn't have the appeal anymore to businesses in the community. It's great for branding, but now businesses want more. We're living in a digital age. We're living in an age where data and analytics are so important to be able to understand your fan or your customer. So, like I said, like it was a really bad thing that happened, but for us, it was a really good thing that happened, and it's really accelerated our business to date.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And I guess building on that too, right? You're saying how, this past year was your real, let's say, first sales year, and it's been fantastic. And I know I have you guys on LinkedIn. I've been seeing some of the growth and some of the clients you've been able to sign. You might maybe want to share, just for some people listening, hey, some of the teams you're working with and that are clients of FanSaves.
Yeah, definitely. We're really proud of the roster of teams that we have partnered with right now. We're partnered with teams in 20 different professional leagues across North America, including teams in the NHL, the NLL, and 2 in the MLR, Major League Rugby. And then just recently, we were backed by Comcast NBC. So we were accepted into the Comcast NBC Sports Tech Accelerator. And through that program, we've been paired with NASCAR, where we're working towards a proof of concept. So just, really surreal. Like we always envisioned we would get to this point. We always hoped we would get to this point. It took a little bit longer with a couple of years with the pandemic, but we're finally getting to that like major league level where we're getting that major league traction, and teams are starting to see the value that our platform can bring to them. So it's a really exciting time. But for me personally, big Ottawa Senators fan, grew up here in Ottawa and got the chance to partner with the Ottawa Senators. We're just currently onboarding their partners right now. So super excited about that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I'm sure that just might be a dream come true, where I know at the beginning you were talking about how you were always dreaming of playing in the NHL. I'm sure being an Ottawa Senators fan, that was part of the dream, but now it's kind of, let's say, just reimagined, let's say, where you're now still part of the team, but just in a different way you're helping the business. So I think that's probably a definitely cool experience for you.
It's a cool full circle moment for sure. And one of the other really cool things is like, I always thought like, while I was playing pro and working in the front office, that was heading towards a career in the front office for a major league team such as the Ottawa Senators, my hometown team. And it didn't work out like that. But we get to work with teams on a daily basis. Working with teams all across different sports and different leagues. So for me, I feel like I've achieved that. I get to. It's not just like one task I'm focused on for one team every day. I get to work with teams all across the spectrum. So it's really rewarding.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I'm sure it's just, very full circle moment, right? We're just able to kind of see it all come together. And I guess talking about a full circle moment, what I do with every podcast is I have 2 questions I like to ask every guest then, just because I think it puts a nice little bow on and caps it off well. So as we just did here, right? We went over your whole career. We're able to kind of hear about all your different experiences, which has been, unreal to hear. But for those who have listened, 133 episodes now, I've been saying since day one, episode 0, I'm going to live until I'm 103. I'm going to be on a rocking chair, listening back to this podcast, just to remember the cool things that happened throughout my career. But now that you're on this podcast, I want to put that question on yourself. So let's say you live to 103 as well. You're in a rocking chair, sitting back and forth, just trying to think back to, all these amazing memories through your career so far. What's maybe one story to date that's going to stand out to you when you're 103 on that rocking chair and be like, wow, I can't believe I got to do that for a career?
Yeah, holy cow. Where do I start? I'll give two examples, and I'll make them short. The first was, we've created this like great relationship with the U.S. ambassador to Canada, Ambassador David Cohen. He's a big advocate for women in business and women entrepreneurs. So he's really taken a liking to Shannon. And it was really cool. The other day, she got invited to the presidential state dinner and got to meet President Biden and Justin Trudeau and other people like that. So that was really cool for her. But one afternoon, we got an email and we were invited by the U.S. Embassy to attend lunch at the ambassador's residence here in Ottawa. And they also, it was a part of an event around like hockey. So they had like all the executives from the Ottawa Senators, including the president, the GM, and also like the president and GM and other hockey operations staff from the Philadelphia Flyers who were in town playing that night. So, picture yourself sitting in like this really fancy, like ambassador's residence surrounded by all these like top end executives. And it was just a really cool moment. We were like, wow, like we thought of an idea 4.5, 5 years ago, and now we're sitting in the U.S. ambassador's house with all these like incredible like executives in sports. So that was like a really cool moment. The other moment that I can think of that was actually recent was we went to Orlando for the NBC Sports Tech Accelerator the first week in person. So we got to do some amazing like bucket list sports items. We got to go to Daytona Speedway and did a cool fireside chat there. We got to go to the Arnold Palmer Invitational for a couple days and kind of watch that tournament and get a behind the scenes of all the tech. We got to watch a WWE event, which was really cool. That was my first one. It was an NXT event. And then we got brought to like the PGA Tour head office, which backs onto TPC Sawgrass. So within a week, we and all this and more, we stayed at Universal Studios. It was just like treated A+ the entire time. And this program has been so outstanding, but that week alone, like I said, we checked off like multiple buckets list items. So those are two really like cool moments that kind of stand out to me from recently.
Yeah, that's awesome. And definitely want to hear, let's see what comes up, because I'm sure if that's only happening in the last month, in the last little bit, what it's going to look like going forward. So that's fantastic. And I guess that's perfect to kind of lead into the last question I then have. Right, we went into the future. We're talking about you at 103 and things you're going to remember. Now, if we go all the way back in time, we're talking about, let's say Kris, who's in university, who's kind of doing both jobs, both being a pro and a student. What's one piece of advice that you've now learned throughout all of your experiences that you shared with us that kind of sticks out to you? You're like, hey, this is something that I wish, a younger Kris knew.
Yeah, I think something that really resonates like with the theme of this podcast is like everything happens for a reason. Everything that's happened in my life has kind of led me to where I am now, and I'm really happy with that. If I hadn't blown out my knees, maybe I would have continued playing hockey, and who knows where I'd be. If I don't know, there's just so many things that could have changed, and so I think that's what I would say looking back.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. And if I'm not mistaken, something Shannon said when she was just on with us was all the wrong things had to happen for the right thing to then happen, which I think is kind of a cool quote, kind of similar to what you're saying, right? Where who knows where things would have ended up if, your injury didn't happen, or, who knows, that fight, etc. Right? There's so many different things that could have, gone a different direction, and I'm sure you would have been in a much different position. Same with Shannon, but yeah, unless there's
even like mistakes, like mistakes happen. And I think like understanding them, learning from them, and like moving and being better after that, like that's a really important thing in life, like outside of business, just in general. So yeah, when I say like everything happens for a reason, like I truly mean that. Like there's a lot of things where you question, like, we lost our pet or whatever, like it was like, why did that happen? And like you have to try to like learn from it, understand the positives, and just apply it. So
yeah, I know. And to be honest, I completely agree with that, where I was listening to a podcast clip of someone else the other day, and one of the things they were just questioning was, in the last bit or even your whole life, how many times have you planned something and things have gone that way, right? Where even if it's a move, right? And I think what they're discussing is they bought a mattress and it was all rolled up, and then they're like, oh, I'm just going to undo it and get ready for bed. it takes hours, right? And then no matter what you have planned or what you think is going to happen, it actually never ends up happening. And that's why it happens for a reason. So I think that's kind of a perfect way to end it. And unless there's anything else you'd like to share, I just want to thank you, Shannon, and the FanSaves team for setting this up and coming on the podcast.
Yeah, big fan of the podcast. Appreciate you having me here, and hopefully someone can resonate with my story. And if anyone wants to connect with me, I'm pretty heavy on LinkedIn, big fan of LinkedIn, so I'm pretty easy to reach. But no, appreciate you so much, Kris, for having me here today, and looking forward to listening to the episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And that's it for episode 133. Check out Kris's episode. Obviously, this is the one you're listening to, and Shannon's as well. That's 132. And that's it for this week, and talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.